Well, welcome and thank you for coming. I'm Sandra Schofield, and this is the first time I've ever read in Missoula, so big occasion. I will read you the teeny blurb before. It's the early 60s. The Grateful Dead and free love are still around the corner. But the young woman in these three stories knows that sex is the coin of the realm. From Mexico to Mykonos, she's looking for a place to light, and she thinks she'll know when she's finally home. For sure she knows she doesn't want men to tell her how to live. She doesn't even want them saying her name. So, it's three stories about the same character, who, as that indicates, doesn't have a name. She's called Baby early on, and then after that she introduces herself as Baby to people. The first story, in the first story, she hitchhikes. These are all in the 60s. She hitchhikes from New York to Stockton, California, to see a young man who just got out of the Army, whom she met for 3 hours 2 years earlier. The second story takes place on a bullfighter's ranch in Mexico, where she is a guest. And the third story takes place in Mykonos. And I was going to read from the bullfighter, but I think I'll read a little lighter. Swim. Swim is not a light story, but it starts out that way. It takes place on Mykonos. Let me figure out, because I'm changing my mind, how far in I'll read.
How did you happen to pick Stockton in your first story?
Well, because
I was born there.
Were you? Well, when I was a freshman in college, I went to a national debate tournament in Stockton. And we had a half a day when they drove us around and stuff. And I was from a little town in I was from West Texas. And I thought Stockton was just great, and it stuck in my head. Who knows? And the next time that Stockton ever came up was in 2008, when in the economic crash, when I happened to read an article and see pictures from Stockton where there were just seas of empty houses in the suburbs. So I hope they have recovered from that.
From that maybe.
Yeah. All right. Hang on a second. All right. And these stories were written at different times, going back many years, and they were in a box in my closet, and I've been going through those boxes of old stories, novels that I started that I didn't like after I got in 100 pages or 40 or 60. And the amazing thing is, if I pick any of that up, and I don't even remember thinking those things, let alone writing them, but these three stories really struck me as being something that went together as a narrative about a person, so I rewrote them, and that's what we've got. All right, I'll read a little bit, and then we can talk a little bit. This story is called Swim. They met Baby the day they got off the ferry, looking like the hick tourists they were. The crowd from the boat flowed around them while they dawdled at the end of the quay. They weren't even on the island they thought they were, and they had no idea what to do next. Look at us, a couple of ducks at a dog show, Walker said. I ain't getting back on a boat for days, Boney said. I'm a soldier, not a seaman. Walker slapped Boney's idea. Wasn't this your idea? He shrugged one shoulder to hitch up the strap of his duffel bag. I'm starved, Boney said. The harbor was behind them, and in front of them was a maze of whitewashed buildings piled up like kids' blocks. Off to the right, there were tables shaded by a big blue tarp. A man with a white cloth tucked in his waistband was serving customers from a large tray. Walker pointed at them. "How about over there?" "I'm not picky," Boney said. All of a sudden, there was a young, skinny woman in a hot pink shift beside them. "You don't want to do that." They stared at her. "The thing is, as soon as they see a boat pulling in, they switch menus and double their prices. You have to get out of sight of water. Are you day trippers?" "Do what?" Boney said. "When I got here 3 weeks ago," she said, "there were crowds pouring in all day. But not so many now. You came at a good time." Walker shaded his eyes and assessed the hills. "This ain't Santorini, huh?" The woman pointed to the crones lined up like ravens on a roof. They were shouting at a handful of tourists. "They'll rent you rooms. If you don't mind 4 in a room, you can get a bed for a quarter. For a few bucks, you could share a room, just the 2 of you." "Like the barracks," Boney said. "I'll check some places I know after we eat." They turned a few corners and lined up at a window in an alley wall. The cafe was a 3-sided closet. In the back, there were grills over stone cooking pits. The woman said, "Your treat, okay?" She ordered and Boney paid. "Oh, baby," he said after the first bite, "you are off to a good start." They ate scraped morsels of crackled lamb on folded flatbread with tomatoes, cucumbers, a tart white sauce. They sat on a low wall, leaning forward to let the sandwiches drip. They introduced themselves. Walker was the taller man with broad shoulders and a wide, firm chin. Boney had the same chin, but on a smaller face. He was small in the hips like a teenage boy. They were cousins, sons of brothers. "Hodel," Walker said, "rhymes with yodel. Everybody remembers that." They were on leave from an army base in Germany. Their hair was cut close and their clothes were clean and crisp. "We're from Lawton, Oklahoma. You probably don't even know where that is." "Guess again," she said. "My mother was born in Chickasha, and I was born in Wichita Falls." "Oh, baby," Boney said. "I'd never take you for a Texan. What's your name?" "Baby'll do," she said. "Y'all can call me Baby." They followed her through the maze out into a square. "Wait here." Walker lit a cigarette, and they watched a group of girls swarm through the square in tight formation. The girls wore short dresses or tank tops and bell-bottom pants. They wore long earrings and jangly bracelets. They looked around as they walked, flitty, pretty girls. They saw the men, but with the flickering attention of fireflies. "Man, I could go for some of that," Walker said. Boney was thinking about something else. Baby looked like his sister, Kel. "Do you think she's a whore?" he said. The room was the interior of a windmill near the town beach, farther on from the harbor beyond the square. There were 2 beds, a table and 1 wooden chair, a single bare bulb in the ceiling. There were big jugs of water in a wide enamel pan, 2 towels. The bathroom was an outhouse a few steps outside a door, and there was no running water. Baby stood in the doorway while they looked around. "It's scenic," Walker said. Boney threw his bag down on the end of the bed away from the door. "Dibs," he said. Baby took their money for 3 nights. "You got a friend?" Walker said. She laughed. "It's not too friendly a place, but I have a roommate, Daphne. She's German. I can ask." "Great," Boney said, although German girls scared him. After she was gone, the men sat on the beds. There wasn't much give. Thin mattresses were laid on low, rough wood platforms and covered in coarse white sheets and multicolored woven spreads. The pillows were terrible sacks of stuffing, but the men were used to that. They stretched out and listened to the whap of the paddles turning above them. They had left Athens before dawn. The room was light and cool, with 4 open windows high in the walls. Boney stood up and looked out of one. "This sure beats Berlin," he said. They had gone to Berlin one weekend in March, and they had a terrible time. Walker dumped his duffel bag on the bed. "Let's go swim. We are on a GD island." "So do you?" "Do I what?" "Think she's out for something." Well, of course she is, Boney, but that don't make her a prostitute. Did you see her wolf down at lunch? That girl is hungry. She earned it. If she was hot to trot, she wouldn't have got us a double room, would she? She'd have split us up and took her pick. Boney thought it over. Maybe we're just friendly. Maybe we're just lucky that she's friendly and all. He didn't like judging people. In the army, you did what you were told to do. It took a load off him not to think so much. Walker stripped and pulled on his swim trunks. Boney changed too. It was plenty warm, but his pale legs felt pimply and cold. They both put on t-shirts and ugly sandals they had bought in Athens and then picked up their towels. Boney waited. Walker was thinking. Walker was a year older. In a week he'd be 21. He had been born the day the Japs surrendered. Boney figured that was why Walker was a more serious person. Boney looked to him a lot for explanations. Did you see those girls in the square, Boney? You see yourself sidling up to one of those girls? Shoot, we're out of our league on this candy-ass island. You don't know what you find when you go out to see the world, Boney said. And they both laughed because it was just plain true. Both men were hard-shell primitive Baptists. They had grown up in families who didn't drink, dance, play cards, curse, or chase women. Still, you couldn't be in the army and not learn a few new things. They liked a beer once in a while, poker for low stakes, rock and roll. But women? When they left Lawton, all they'd ever known were girls. Boney still wrote to his high school girlfriend, Candace, who was in Alva studying to be a nurse. He had touched her breast once under her shirt, and she told her mother. He caught hell from all sides, but it blew over. They didn't have any plans. Walker had never been attached. He had about decided to be an army man for the long haul. The beach was nothing to write home about, but the sea was turquoise. They splashed around and declared the water was worth the trip. Walker swam way out past everyone and back, then cut across and swam parallel to the beach. Mostly he did a steady, strong crawl, even and pure as a machine. A girl sat up and watched him. When Walker got back to their towels, Boney was sleeping. Walker nudged Boney's shin. Let's walk around. I like to know where I am. They found free public showers on a side street off the square, then went to the room to change clothes. It's a pretty place, Walker said, but it don't seem exactly real, does it? Do you ever wonder what it would be like if you were born someplace else, Boney said. No, I don't ask myself dumbass questions, Boney. They stood around the square, but there was no sign of baby among the tourists. It was hot, and people had bared as much skin as they dared. Walker and Boney picked out Scandinavians who walked with long strides and were tall and blonde, and the French who were small and noisy. A girl in a bikini brushed right by Walker. He could smell suntan lotion on her skin. He could smell her hair. He said, Lordy. The outdoor cafes were getting crowded. It was almost dark. They went to the cafe with a blue tarp over by the harbor and found a free table. You boys have the right idea, the waiter said cheerfully. Eat with Greeks. We cook 100% Greek. He gestured to a nearby table. It was crowded with black-haired men. On the other side of those men was a family with two neatly dressed little boys. Where are all the Greek girls? Walker said. Home with their mothers, the waiter said. He laughed. We got good meatballs. Americans, they like good meatballs. Do we get the same prices as them? Walker said, gesturing to the Greek customers. The waiter made a show of great wounded astonishment. We got best food, best prices. You go around and check, you come back here. So they ordered lemonades. The waiter shook his head as if they had made a sad mistake. Everybody's got advice here, Boney said. It was nice. In Berlin, even the hotel clerk was unhelpful. The lemonades came. Grassy bits floated on top. The men scooted their chairs so they could lean against the wall. Walker picked the specks out of his drink with the straw. A lot of tourists had appeared almost at once. Walker said, What do you think's going on? "It's a dang parade," Pony said. He waved at the waiter and ordered a plate of meatballs. It came on a plate in a pool of oil with a heap of bread. They watched the stream of tourists while they ate hurriedly, their heads low, force of habit. And a pelican waddled right by them. "Will you look at that?" Walker said. Boney said, "Wish I'd ordered fish." One of the men at the neighboring table stuck his foot out and jostled the pelican. The bird raised its broad wings and scuttled by. Some tourists nearby laughed, stepping back to make room. One of the kids at the nearby table shrieked, and Walker said, "How often do you think they wind him up?" "The bird or the boy?" Boney said. "Here you are," Baby said when she caught up with them. "We ate without you," Boney said. "Oh, I had a big lunch." But she plucked a leftover piece of bread and swiped it through the meatball grease and ate it quickly. I'll go to one more part. Give you a different feeling. Okay. That evening while they were eating in the square, Baby and Daphne found them and pulled up chairs. They were cheerful and fresh scrubbed in jeans and t-shirts. "Order something," Walker said. "Really, eat up." But there were scraps of fish, macaroni, tomatoes, and bread on the boys' plates. The girls cleaned up the platters, eating with their hands. "Well, let's have dessert," Boney said. Baby ordered pastries that were like donut holes, soaked in honey, sweet and gooey but light, that came on a big platter. They ate with their fingers, making a mess. Daphne took Walker's hand and licked 2 fingers, then blinked at her as if she had said something in a foreign language. They went onto the beach where the moonlight made the sand look fragile. They bent at the edge of the water to wash their hands, and Walker put his arm around Daphne's waist. And Boney thought, "When lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin." What could he say, though? Walker knew the scripture as well as Boney did. And then Baby whispered to Boney, "Why don't we go to church?" The church doors were locked, though, and Boney said, "It's okay. Churches make me nervous. The gold, the pictures. We don't worship idols in Oklahoma." "I know a place you'd like, though." They went through the streets above the town where there were no lights. Baby took out a small flashlight and shone it on the ground. She said, "We're walking where it's rough, so be careful." He thought he heard an animal in the brush, the skitter of small rocks. They came to a simple round building with a dark roof. The door was loose on its hinges and squeaked as Baby opened it. When they were inside, she shined the light across the walls and the floor. The room was the size of a generous parlor, bare of furniture with nothing on the walls. Bits of paper and a few bottles were strewn about. She showed him a spot just out of the moonlight where they could sit and face the door. She picked up a crumpled sweatshirt on the floor, shook it, and put it down for them to sit on. They leaned against the wall and pulled up their knees. She said, "This was a chapel, but they left nothing in it. See, there were paintings on the wall over there." But he couldn't see, not in the illumination of her small flashlight. And besides, she clicked the light off, and there was a swath of pale moonlight across her face. "I came up here once with girls from my house," she said. "One of them had some pot. We smoked, we sang Beatles songs. All of us had been traveling all summer. We talked about where we'd been, and then we smoked more dope, and then we took our clothes off and danced, and we said, 'Hey, hey, we're witches.' We said, there was a time they would have burned us at the stake." Then one of the girls started crying. She said she wanted to go home, and she did the next day. Baby reached over and took Boney's hand. I felt smug. I've always wanted to be a person who has been places. I came to Europe in May. I've only spent $200. Has it been fun? Well, I've always been on the go. I hitched, slept in hostels, spent days waiting for ferries. And I went right through the big cities because they cost too much. I traveled to a place because I heard someone mention it, and then as soon as I got there, I thought about where to go next. I kept thinking it would be better when I got to this island, but once I settled down, I was lonesome. Those girls, that dance, it was like I dreamed it. In 2 days, all those girls were gone. The expats, they stay to themselves. The tourists are here a day, 2 days, a week at most. People get stoned and they sleep together, and the next day they don't speak to each other. That happened to me, not here in Spain, an Irish guy. He didn't want to hear about Spain. He said, you know, you could go home. I don't know where that would be. My boyfriend lives in Chicago, but I only lived there a year, and we're just awful together. I don't have any family. She let go of Boney's hand. Boo-hoo-hoo, she said, little orphan. Don't worry, I never cry. I just pick at my feet. We had a little bitty earthquake here one night last week, and I thought, dear God, I'm going to die in Greece. I liked the idea. I sat up the rest of the night waiting while the other girls slept through it. In the morning, my heels were bloody. My boyfriend is always telling me that I suffer from free-floating anxiety. I never heard of that, Boney said. Ennui? Nope. God, I love soldiers, she said, leaning on his shoulder. Salt of the earth. Is that so? Maybe she was mocking him. Once I hitchhiked across the whole country to see a soldier I'd spent 2 hours with years before. I thought he would take care of me. Try and guess how that went. Here's what I know about soldiers. They love a free-spirited girl until they decide she ought to be a better person. They think they can make that happen if she'll cooperate. What about your boyfriend? Doesn't he want to marry you and give you a reason to settle down? Oh, that's no good. He's 40 years old. My mother would be 40 if she was alive. He's with me because I'm young, and I'm with him because I'm poor, and we like each other's friends. She got up, and Boney jumped up beside her. He leaned against the wall, and she stepped away, twisting her shoulders. She said, I want my own damned reasons to be who I am and who I become, and I want my schedule for it. Boney said, I have a sister, Kel. She ran away from Lawton. She was 14 years old. The police picked her up in Norman 5 days later. A waitress had taken her home the night before, and when she was asleep, the woman called the police. Kel never told us what she did those nights. Oh, Baby said, what a bad, bad girl. Did she straighten up and fly right after that? She flunked out of school. She can't hold a job. My folks tell her what Paul said, those who do not work shall not eat. Hey, look at that, Baby said, as if he wasn't saying something here. She shined her light on stuff on the floor, condoms, cigarette butts. She put her hands on his chest, startling him. The light shined up into his eyes. Your little sister has her own mind, Boney. She doesn't know how to read it yet. She doesn't know what will make her feel good. Can you guess what would make me feel good, Boney? I bet Walker could guess. His cheeks flamed. He left the chapel quickly and started onto the path. He took 5 or 6 steps and slid down. Hold on there, Boney. She stepped ahead and shined a light. Follow me, she said, but he still couldn't see. I'm sorry, she said. My boyfriend says I'm hostile. That's all. Thank you. So, any questions, any comments, anything?
Where did you, which event kicked off the idea for the book in your mind?
Well, like I said, the 3 stories were written at separate times, and it wasn't until I was trying to organize those papers that I thought, these 3 stories have the same character, and they're all within a couple years of each other. I think this is a narrative, and so then I worked on them to make things show up, you know, across them and turn them into something that did go together. It just seemed really obvious to me. And the funny thing, the only one that was ever published as a story is the one that I was just reading. The other 2 I never was able to get published because they were too long. Just really hard to publish a long story. So it was really nice to be able to put together a manuscript, a little over 100 pages, this is, in which you see her kind of development.
I love the way that 2 cousins, you learn about them through the other
Yeah.
Very nice.
So, you know, in each case, I've been in those places, I spent time. I was on Mykonos for a month. So long ago that there was only one hotel. And when I was working on that story, I looked Mykonos up online and just about fainted. It's the gay scene of the Cyclades. That's where you go if you're a guy. So anyway, but that's fun to share with you, and I really appreciate you coming.
What happened to Baby? Think of the title of the book. What's the title?
Swim.
Oh.
At the end, I mean, there's an ending, there's an arc to it at the end, but I wouldn't tell you.
Yeah.
You need to read all the way to that. And actually, I had so much fun putting this together and writing about sex that I started another book about a young woman who just finished junior college in Odessa, Texas in 1967, and her best friend has become an American airline stewardess and lives in Chicago. So her uncle and her father and her grandmother pulled their money and got her a used Volkswagen Bug, and she heads off for Chicago. So there will be some events there. I lived in Chicago in the late 60s, and I thought about it a lot because of the Ken Burns show, because that's when all, you know, when so many things were going on. But there also was Twiggy. I got my hair cut like Twiggy, and you know, and there was music, and I worked in a bar where the really good blues people came and played. At the time, I had no idea who they were or what they were, but it was fun. So, to be young. I never write about now, I can assure you that. So, anything else? Well, thank you,
I
huh?
bought a copy of the book, and I was going to ask you about or yeah, that too, you want you to autograph it, but your dialogue and I'm trying to think, are you picking up snippets of dialogue from people while you're just in a public place, or you're concentrating on?
Well, I wrote the story. Actually, in a way, yes, because I always kept a journal. So when I was on Mykonos, I kept a lot of notes, and I did meet soldiers on leave. And I mean, these particular events weren't what happened, but you know, all kinds of. In fact, when I first decided I would write a story set on Mykonos, I was like 25 years old, and I made some effort, but you know, at that age, I had no idea what the story was. You know, it was just, I went to Mykonos and hung out for 2 months. So but I kept all these notes. So I did have scraps of dialogue and stuff. And that's an example of like when you take 3 stories and put them together, you try to find ways to have threads go through them. So in the Mexico story, in my revision, one of the things that came out in that story is she's staying on this ranch, and he asks her, you know, you can stay as long as you want to, but you're going to get tired of it. What the hell are you going to do with yourself? She says, I want to be a writer. And he says, nobody wants to be a writer. You either write or you don't. And the next day, he got a typewriter and a ream of paper and gave it to her and said, so write. And so there's a place, so then I'd look for places, and in some ways I think, one of the real themes of this story is that the girl wants to be a writer, and that keeps coming up. And there's a place where she says, just a paragraph, it's the day of the bullfight, and she caped a little cow. It's not a bullfight, it's the testing of the calves. And she's embarrassed, and it's the middle of the night, and she's in the library. And he comes up, and he says to her, you know, everybody here wants something. Carla wants to, that's his girlfriend, Carla wants to get married. She would love the press. My secretary wants me to give her a job in Mexico City. Santiago, the cook, wants to cook in a hotel. Leonardo wants a house in the village, and Marcelo wants to start over as a torero. The American girls want to sleep with a bullfighter. And my Kikuyu guide wants to come back to Mexico with me. What do you want, Nina? I'm surprised. He's never asked me about myself. He doesn't know where I grew up or where I started college or whether I have family. He doesn't have any curiosity about women, maybe not about people in general. He just saw me by a pool in a hotel and took me back to the ranch like he had bought me at Sears. I want an answer, he said. Don't go digging around and being clever. Just tell me, what do you want? I want to see things, I said. I want to remember things. And one day I'll write about them. I'll write about you. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you for buying the book. I'm going to sign it.
Sandra, when did you first start thinking of yourself as a writer?
Well, I always wrote. Everyone, you know, my friends would know me as someone who spent her weekend writing a story and then passing it around to be read. But it wasn't until I started my first novel that I thought, well, maybe I'll publish something. You know, I have a little novel I wrote when I was like 9 years old.